Hi, class. This week we were asked to discuss informal consent. We were asked to compare and contrast it to the ACA ethical standards and the state regulation board standards. Upon my research, I did know that it was a difference between the ACA ethical standards and the North Carolina Board of Professional Counseling standards. The difference that I did notice was that the ACA ethical standards discuss that if something were to happen to the counselor, the informal consent should know what the procedures are so that the client can continue their services. However, the North Carolina Board of Professional Counseling does not indicate that that should be a part of the informal consent. So when I pulled up the informal consent from Full Circle Wellness Counseling Center, it did meet all the guidelines of the North Carolina Board of Professional Counseling, and it was only missing the part discussing that if the counselor was to become deceased or unable to provide services, what would the next step be? It did discuss the informal consent did just give the name of the license or the agency. It also listed the highest degree that the counselor did receive. It did provide the counselor's certification number. It did discuss the number of years the counselor has been practicing. It did describe the services that the counselor was offered, and that was well listed and detailed about the services that she does provide. It does discuss the general population that she specializes in. Um, it also discusses the length of session, which she gave in full details, and she also discussed how much she would charge for additional hours. I'm sorry, not hours, but minutes. Um, she discussed the fees, her insurance, what insurance company she does use, how copays and deductibles will be met, and payment options. Um, she did discuss that upon getting a diagnosis, it will be in your medical records and it will continue throughout the course of the session. She did discuss confidentiality, when she would be required to disclose information. Um, Also, it focused on if there was a couples counseling, that some information, if it was an individual session, that some information be shared during the group counseling part of the couples counseling. Um, it did discuss that if any signs of harm or indication of neglect of a child or adult who we would contact, um, gave the information of the North Carolina Professional Board of Counseling, as well as her supervisor's name and contact information. And at the bottom, it has the signature and a date. I also was able to determine upon reading that for North Carolina, when you're renewing your license, that is one of the paperwork that is needed, so that it has to be updated every time you renew your license. I did read the article from Dr. Arfrey Zoloff titled, sorry, Introduction to Informal Consent, in Psychotherapy, Counseling, and Assessment. He discusses the importance of informal consents, the legal aspects of informal consents, and how it protects not only the client but as well as the counselor. Um, the proper way to do informal consent is by written, but he also discussed giving in verbal informal consents. Um, in his article, he discussed, or he pulled other research just in where they discussed that the informal consent can affect the client and counselor relationship, and also discussed in the article how some may argue that the informal consent should be done throughout the duration of the session because of various changes and techniques that will be implemented, but important that it's done prior to providing service. My question is, being that there's a difference between the ACA ethical standards and the North Carolina State Board of Standards, how important is it to put the information in far as concerning if the counselor is unable to provide service due upon death? Thank you.